And he actually said at one point during his letter, Donald Trump, maybe I will appeal to the Supreme Court to just drop this nonsense now. I'm Dr. Duke, and this is Constitution Corner. And we have an interesting constitutional question. I mean, obviously, we have the whole impeachment and the lack of constitutionality there. This we've said this before on other programs. I know a lot of other people have pointed this out as well. It is really an odd situation when one of the major guarantees of the United States Constitution goes out of its way to protect due process. You actually have to commit a crime before you get persecuted for one. You actually have to commit a crime and be proven guilty before you can be punished for a crime. And what's the odd thing about the Democrats' impeachment motion is that it accuses them of all sorts of crimes, but it doesn't actually, in the final analysis, list what they are or explain the criminal activity. It's odd. It's a lot of supposition. It's a lot of innuendo. It's a lot of, we don't like you, so therefore your behavior is criminal. A lot about Donald Trump's personal demeanor, all of that stuff. But many people have talked about the lack of constitutionality around impeachment. We hope the Senate's going to do the right thing. It's possible the Senate may choose not to investigate this, to simply dismiss it for the reasons we just said. There was no real due process here. President Trump was not allowed to call his own witnesses. The people who testified on the conservative side of the issue were severely limited. Procedurally, this was done behind closed doors on hyper-partisan lines. But I want to step away from that for a moment and talk about one other moment in this past week that I think says a lot about our Constitution. One of the things Donald Trump recently did is he wrote a long letter challenging Nancy Pelosi's impeachment movement. He really spared no punches. Clearly, he had legal instruction in terms of how to write this letter, but this letter blasts the process, blasts the politics behind what Nancy Pelosi and her Democrat caucus have done. And he actually said at one point during his letter, Donald Trump, maybe I will appeal to the Supreme Court to just drop this nonsense now. Right? Which is not in itself a bad idea. If indeed the Supreme Court justices are the ultimate arbiters, at least in the judiciary, of what the Constitution says, then maybe appealing to them would cause a majority of those justices to look at the way this particular impeachment was done and to void it. Again, because it doesn't pass constitutional muster. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg, to the surprise of nobody, was asked about this at a gathering, at a talk she was giving. And her response to Donald Trump's theoretical, that maybe I'll appeal to the Supreme Court to scuttle this right now, without letting it move forward. She said one thing. She didn't talk about the Constitution. She didn't talk about the legality of this. She didn't cite the history of impeachment trials or what impeachment means in the Constitution. She simply said very tersely, Donald Trump is not a lawyer. And I thought this was a frighteningly crystallizing moment. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as we know, is the most celebrated of all the current Supreme Court justices. She's got her own children's book written about her. They're selling dolls. They've made fawning hagiographic movies about her. They've made her a progressive saint. They've made her a kind of an honorary Planned Parenthood pantheon of saints. She's got her own action figure, Ruth Bader. She's been given initials. She's now RBG. And that's one thing you should pay attention to on the left. When the left gives you a one-word name like Cher or Madonna, or refers to you by your initials like LBJ or AOC or JFK, you know you've arrived. You've got the bona fides. What really bothered me about her statement was it wasn't a constitutional statement. She dismissed what Donald Trump suggested, that maybe the Supreme Court should consider the constitutionality of this, by saying Donald Trump is not a lawyer. And that lets you in on how her mind works. Antonin Scalia never would have said that. If you had asked that question to Antonin Scalia, he would have given you 2 hours of absolute lecture on constitutional history with notes and citations. Ruth Bader Ginsburg simply said, he's not a lawyer. With all due respect, Ms. Ginsburg, you do realize that one of the main reasons the majority of Americans voted for him, or I should say a electoral majority of Americans voted for him, is because he's not a lawyer. He's also not a politician. He's also not a lobbyist, right? He's not the kind of deep state swamp creature that has a law degree. And I'm not exactly sure the founding fathers would have been impressed that the vast majority of our politicians in the House, in the Congress, the vast majority of our presidents have been from the lawyer class. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it's about the Constitution, it's about a law degree. In fact, the degree to which lawyers spend their time trying to circumvent the Constitution, particularly political lawyers, when it comes to fake impeachment movements, tells you everything you need to know about the law profession. Thank God our founding fathers gave us a constitution and not rule by lawyer. I could think of nothing more damaging to the United States as it's currently configured than to have rule by lawyer, but you de facto do. And when you have a Supreme Court justice whose entire premise is that he's not a lawyer, so we're not going to take seriously his theoretical recommendation, well, it should make you wonder a little bit about putting all your faith, or any of it, in the Supreme Court as it's currently configured. Look, time to just get behind the Constitution. It's not enough to know your Constitution. You got to live your Constitution every day. This has been the Liberty News Hour. As always, you can go to thenewamerican.com and jbs.org for more information on these topics and new shows.